Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Parks, and it's my honor to introduce my co-organizer today. This is Bruce Wiley, who's an M.D. with an M.B.A. He's a systems modeler, computational and digital health expert, a writer, and a health journalist. Dr. Lee has over 2 decades of experience in industry and academia, developing mathematical and computational models to assist a wide range of decision makers in health and in public health. Currently, he is a professor of health policy and management at the City University of New York, Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy, where he is the executive director of PHICOR, the Public Health Informatics, Computational, and Operations Research. Dr. Lee is also the founder and CEO of SimSilico. He has authored over 240 scientific publications and 3 books and has written extensively for the general media. He is a senior contributor for Forbes, covering a wide range of health-related topics. His writing has also appeared in a number of other media outlets, including Time, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Stat, and MIT Technology Review. I'm happy to turn the meeting over to Bruce Wiley. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parks, and welcome to day 2 of the NIH's workshop on precision nutrition. Yesterday, we learned what is meant when we say precision nutrition and what is involved in better understanding and using precision nutrition. Precision nutrition is finding ways to better account for the differences between and among individuals and better tailor nutrition recommendations and diets. So day 1 was focused on what needs to be done. Day 2 then will focus on how to achieve precision nutrition. How do you actually do it? As day 1 showed, there are complex systems of factors affecting nutrition and how your body may respond to different diets. Unaided, we as humans can struggle to understand and address these complex systems. Simple, direct cause and effect relationships can be relatively easy to understand. However, when many different factors may affect your diet and your body, things can get quite complex quite quickly. There are many secondary, tertiary, and potentially reverberating effects. There can even be unintended consequences of seemingly beneficial diets or situations. Fortunately, recent developments in computational power and technology have made it easier to understand these complex systems. These include computational and data approaches associated with buzzwords that you've probably heard in the media or social media, like AI, which means artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, data science, and modeling. But like any technology, such approaches in general, on their own, are neither good nor bad. It's all in how they're used. At best, such tech and approaches can transform nutrition, as technology has transformed many other fields like meteorology, air traffic control, manufacturing, finance, and transportation. However, at worst, they can lead to misinterpretation, misunderstanding, and potentially bias. We're actually at a key inflection point in society in which we can go either direction or somewhere in between when it comes to precision nutrition. That's why a conversation like this and efforts like precision nutrition efforts are very important. So therefore, the first section of the day, Section 4, will be focused on how we should train this next generation of researchers and scientists and others to advance precision nutrition while using a combination of available tech and nutrition knowledge. It is important to break down the silos between tech and nutrition and other areas to create a new generation of researchers who truly understand all these areas in a combined fashion. 2 impressive innovators who have really led the way in breaking down these silos have been Dr. Elizabeth Ginexi at the NIH's ODSS, who has set up a visionary new training program, and Dr. Patricia Mabry, who is currently at the HealthPartners Institute, but while at NIH was a force that helped the NIH advance the use of system science. So we'll be hearing presentations from both of them. This will then be followed by a panel discussion, including Dr. Jessica Mazerik from the Office of Data Science and Strategy, Michael Hittle, and Dr. Lorraine Nelson from Stanford University, and Dr. Sergio Sen from the National Human Genome Research Institute. Then we'll take a short break, We will return at 10:45 a.m. for section 5, which will introduce some of the computational approaches that can help better address and implement precision nutrition and the need for more systems approaches. I'll begin with an introduction to the topic, followed by 3 esteemed researchers in these areas. First will be social network expert, Dr. Kayla DeLahaye from the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California. And then 2 experts in AI and machine learning, Dr. Suchi Seria from Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Christian Hammond from the Northwestern University's McCormick School of Engineering. They're going to expand on the concept to discuss how artificial intelligence is more than just AI. And it's really ways that you can help enhance decision-making in health, healthcare, and nutrition. That'll be followed by a Q&A session with the presenters, and then we'll take a break for lunch. At 1 p.m., join us for part 2, which will cover the opportunities, challenges, and potential pitfalls in using computational approaches and analytics for precision nutrition. Dr. Nico Pronk from the HealthPartners Institute will kick off things talking about translation. So how do we take our knowledge of precision nutrition and all the methodologies that are used to help better understand precision nutrition, and how do you translate it to many decision makers and stakeholders, like the general public, or healthcare professionals, or policymakers, or what have you, and what are the potential challenges and pitfalls. Then Brendan Parent from the New York University's Grossman School of Medicine will address ethical issues with artificial intelligence. So there's many issues to consider that involve things like potential bias, et cetera, when you're using AI and other computational approaches. This will then be followed by a panel discussion that will include Dr. Aaron Siegel from the Weizmann Institute of Science, Dr. Tim Spector from King's College London, Dr. Abigail Horn from the Keck School of Medicine, and Dr. Grace Peng from the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering at the NIH. So this panel discussion will really focus on these different translation issues and the potential ethical issues that may emerge. And finally, we're going to have section 6, which is putting it all together. What does the future hold for implementing precision nutrition science? And that will be a discussion in which we'll sort of wrap up what we've discussed over the past 2 days and discuss the way forward and what does the future hold. So with that, I'd like to pass along the virtual microphone to our first 2 presenters, Dr. Ginexi and then Dr. Mabry, who, as I mentioned, will really be discussing the innovative programs that they have introduced when it comes to training the next generation of precision nutrition scientists and researchers. Hope you enjoy the morning and hope you enjoy the afternoon. And welcome to day 2.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Ginexi, and I'm coming to you from the National Institutes of Health Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. Today I'm going to talk to you about a couple areas of concern for biomedical and behavioral and social sciences research, namely that there's been a dramatic transformation in the data that has altered the nature of health research, and really a mismatch between existing training programs and the career prospects, especially as it relates to the type of data we have. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about a strategy that my office, ODSS, is trying to address these concerns by training scientists in hybrid fields. So I'll tell you about our new BSSR graduate training program. Now, while our pilot program that I'll describe today is focused solely on training for behavioral and social scientists doctoral students, the principles and the approach of how we structure the program should be readily translatable to other disciplines in biomedical and health research. So let me begin by saying that my own research career the past 23 years since I got my doctoral degree in applied social psychology, has fallen in all four of these categories that you see depicted around the frame. I started out working in the areas of community health and prevention, and I became convinced that many of the methods were hampering our ability to answer the questions we were posing. Also, I found that our methods would often drive the questions we would ask, or even the data we could collect. But really, the questions should be driving the methods. Back then, we were a bit limited in our technology and computing capabilities. So when I started graduate school in applied social psych in 1992, we were just about to elect Bill Clinton as our president, whose administration would go on to double the NIH budget, and we were at the beginning of an extraordinary transformation in personal computing capabilities and an internet boom. At the time, in 1992, this is the kind of technology I was using for my studies and my research. I didn't even own a PC. It was too expensive for my budget. I used the PCs that were provided in the lab or in the psychology department. They were DOS-based, they were slow, and many of them didn't even connect to the internet, which we called the World Wide Web at that time. Now, nearly 30 years later, things look more like this. We have high-speed internet access, we have Wi-Fi, we have very affordable and portable computing tools, and we have cloud computing. My first research studies in graduate school all involved collecting data from human subjects research participants. But we got it via paper and pencil surveys. We either scanned the surveys or we hand entered the data into our PCs to create Excel spreadsheets, and then we imported that into SAS to analyze on a mainframe server that was located all the way at the under campus. Now, today, we can do our computing right on our laptop, and we have troves of data that come from digital sources. No more hand entering required, unless you want to. We've got smartphones, wearables, sensors, GPS data, trace data from the web, administrative health records, school data, community data, retail and purchase data, behavior that's collected from social media outlets, as well as many high-density sample complete census enumeration databases. This dramatic technology and data transformation over the past 30 years or so has given us a whole new landscape for health research. We've had a transition from a data-limited environment where our data was primarily prospectively obtained to a data-rich environment where data are collected dynamically over time and from multiple sources in a digitally connected world. We've seen advances in medical informatics, electronic health records, big data analytics, wearables, and social media, geospatial data, and our ability to link and curate these data. We have vast troves of rich data that are ready to analyze, some of which come from public and administrative data sets, federal agencies, international statistical agencies, and all could be used for population research. Finally, this means that we need to work in multidisciplinary teams. This is now crucial. Much of the big data that we have cannot be worked with by single investigator projects. Team science is now quite critical to our enterprise. We need not only new tools to analyze the data, but it calls for the health research enterprise to embrace the shift from the old way of single investigator focused R01 grants at the NIH towards facilitating larger team science approaches. We need to find ways both to fund these new projects, but also to train the new scientific workforce to work in these teams. And we need universities and research organizations to embrace and reward their faculty for doing so. It's probably no surprise to this audience that the job market for science careers has changed dramatically over the past several decades. Much of the public enthusiasm for STEM rests on the assumption that these fields are rich in job opportunity, and some are. However, frankly, some aren't. STEM is an expansive category, spanning many disciplines and occupations, from software engineers, data scientists, geologists, astronomers, physicists, psychologists, and the like. In a recent analysis, Edward Lazowska, who's a professor of computer science at the University of Washington, took a look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics employment forecasts in STEM categories. And he projected that by the decade ending 2024, 73% of STEM job growth will be in computer-related science occupations. But only 3% will be in the physical sciences and 3% in the life sciences. Back in 2017, the journal Nature surveyed more than 5,700 early career scientists worldwide who were working on their PhDs. 3/4 of them said it was likely that they would pursue an academic career when they graduate. Global figures are hard to come by, but only 3 or 4 in every 100 PhD students in the UK will land a permanent staff position at a university, and those numbers are only a little bit better in the United States. So simply put, most PhD students need to make plans for a life out of academia. So, universities and PhD supervisors need to make this clear. The Nature survey also revealed that 1/3 of the respondents did not have useful conversation about these types of careers with their PhD supervisors. Finally, another point of data that we can look at is a workshop that was convened by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine held in 2017. The workshop was called Graduate Training in the Social and Behavioral Sciences. They published their findings and recommendations from that effort in this brief report, which you can download from their website. Among the main conclusions was that graduate training for the behavioral and social sciences has largely remained unchanged for the last 35 years. Here are a couple of the challenges identified in their workshop. First, they found a gulf between the number of scientists qualified and the number of opportunities that are available in academia. Also, tenure-track positions are in decline. There was declines in research money, and the average age of scientists getting their first R01 grant from the NIH rose from age 36 in 1980 to age 43 in 2016. Second, they noticed that there's a mismatch between the training and the career prospects. Programs are really training solely for faculty positions, not for industry or other environments. And finally, the nature of our research has evolved. Team science is now a key feature. There's a premium on collaboration and multidisciplinary and multi-investigator projects. Moreover, they noted the growing use of preprints, the emergence of data science, and generally a more connected online scientific community, all of which that are not really being addressed in our current training. Here are some takeaways. First, perhaps obvious, achieving interdisciplinary science remains a significant challenge for students, for faculty, and for institutions. Developing the next generation of PhD programs is likely to require a significant academic culture. That's going to be difficult. We need programs that will prepare students for a wider range of careers beyond just the tenure track position. Students in the next generation of programs will need to have better preparation to communicate across scientific disciplines and with a wider range of types of scientists and non-scientists. There is also a greater need for diversity in our graduate programs. And finally, graduate programs need to play a larger role in training for creation of responsible scientists. Yet, despite all the surveys, all the reports, all the meetings, universities have been slow to change the way we train our future scientists. So let me pick on my own discipline of psychology for a moment here. But, psychology is far from being alone in its slowness to adapt. In 1999, the American Psychological Association created a task force on statistical inference, and they published a report in American Psychologist that called for disciplinary reforms in light of the continuing debates over the application of significance testing in psychology journals. The task force was charged with making recommendations around the application of statistics, including significance testing, but also around the implementation of newer methodologies that are being made possible like powerful computers that were coming online at the time. Fortunately, one group of psychologists at Arizona State University was well poised to look at the possible impact of the task force recommendations by examining whether graduate training programs had become adapting and doing something different. Leona Aiken, Steve West, and Roger Millsap at Arizona State University conducted a survey of all psychology Ph.D. programs in North America back in 1990. So they simply went back out and replicated the survey again in 2008 to see whether the training had changed. And here's what they found. First, PhD students were still receiving very traditional training in methodology and statistics that primarily supported laboratory research. Second, training in new analytic methodologies was generally unavailable within the psychology curriculum. And third, there was a substantial lack of awareness about resources on their campuses that could provide this quantitative training, even though the training was sorely needed. So, one last thing is important to note that even among the elite psychology programs that they looked at, there was no advantage in quantitative training. So this leads me to this slide here where we really want to re-envision the training for the behavioral and social sciences disciplines. I stole this slide from Bob Kaplan's talk at that National Academies workshop that I spoke of earlier. I tweaked it a little bit. On the left, you see really what the current curriculum looks like. We're training primarily for professors in their own discipline. And the methodologies, particularly in my own field, like psychology and sociology and the like, we're focused on small samples, non-harmonized measures, and frequent statistics. What we need to add is here on the right. We need to train for a range of job opportunities, focus on team science, multidisciplinary work, and a broader toolbox of methodologies to deal with all this complex data, big data, data science, harmonized measures, pattern linkage, machine learning, computational modeling, causal inference. With all this in mind, I worked with some program colleagues across the NIH to craft an entirely new training program to see if we could start to change this. My office, OBSSR, published this RFA in 2019, but I will say that it took pushing tradition out of the way a bit to make this happen. Since our office does not administer a grant portfolio, in order to make this a reality, I had to convince some of our NIH institutes to partner with us to create the new program. Over the course of the year, I traveled back and forth to several NIH institutes to give presentations and pitch my idea and get their input and feedback. So I faced some skepticism, but I also faced quite a bit of enthusiasm. However, even among those who were most excited, none of the institutes were able to commit funds from their very limited training budgets. So this led me to go back to my office and try to convince my boss, the director of OBSSR, that our office needed to fund this program, since the NIH institutes could not do it. I created a budget projection, lobbied my case. It took a while, but I guess I was persuasive. So for the first time in OBSSR's 25-year history, our office agreed to set aside $2 million every year for 5 years to fund a new transdisciplinary T32 training program. With this in hand, I went back to the institutes to get them to sign on, and they looked at me like I was crazy. OBSSR is going to pay? Yes, but we need your grantees to apply to the RFA and for you to administer the grants. So I got one IC to say yes, that led to another one to say yes, and eventually, before I knew it, I had 11 that signed up. Now, we've funded training in the past at OBSSR, but not like this. In the past, we primarily focused on postdoctoral training institutes. They were very popular and quite successful. So the idea here was that you would have postdocs and early career scientists get together for a week-long training event, and the retraining would help them be better positioned to partner with computational scientists. We felt now was the time was right to try something entirely new that we'd never done before. Specifically, I felt it was critical that we should start earlier in the career trajectory to see if, rather than funding single postdocs to retrain just for a week, whether we could fund an entire cohort of connected graduate students who would receive multiple years of training and they might get a much more in-depth exposure to computational tools and analysis while also getting their degrees in their main disciplines. So you can read the full solicitation here at this link or drop RFA-OD-19-011 into Google and get all the details. I'm going to give you the highlights next. Our aim was to create a new pilot behavioral and social sciences research pre-doc training program that would focus on innovative computational or data science analytic approaches and their incorporation into training for the future BSSR health research workforce. The vision of the program is to support a development of a cohort of specialized pre-doc candidates who would possess advanced competencies in data science analytics and apply that to an increasingly complex landscape of behavioral and social sciences health-related big data. This, we hope, would essentially give students exposure early on in their training to the kinds of analytic tools and methods for handling big data sources that they might want to use in their own research. To achieve this transdisciplinary hybrid training approach, each program that was proposed in the RFA had to address these three components. First, the coursework, training experiences in academia and industry had to reflect a multidisciplinary team approach, collaborative research opportunities, mentorship and advanced computational methods, and an emphasis on reproducibility. Second, we wanted the students to have core competencies across three areas: computer science and informatics, statistics and mathematics, as well as their main discipline in behavioral social sciences research in their chosen health domain. Finally, we wanted them to learn about aspects of computer science and informatics and statistics and mathematics that would directly be relevant for the behavioral and social sciences and health research. Now, instead of prescribing specific types of analytic methods that we wanted them to train, because those evolved too quickly, we decided that the RFA should instead focus on calling for training to deal with particular kinds of complex data that the students might encounter. We identified these three types of complex data, and we called for the applicants to create programs that would train their students on how to do research and analysis with these kinds of data. Each program was asked to choose one or more of these kinds of data to specialize in at their respective training sites and describe how they would create a new training program to suit the needs of the RFA. Now, a unique feature of this Trans NIH program is that we at ODSS are linking up the funded sites for the purposes of cross-site communication and planning. We're hoping that these cross-site exchanges between faculty and trainees will offer a value-added component to the training experience. We're hosting cross-site webinars and annual trainee summits for everyone to come together, network, and exchange ideas. Each site's going to have up to 5 trainees per year across a 5-year funding period. So we hope that will translate to a lively cohort of new behavioral and social scientists who are all networked and excited to work across university and disciplinary boundaries. So to finish up, here's a list of the funded sites. Now, we just got up and running in the fall of 2020, so this is a work in progress. We hope to generate many lessons learned for others over time. Some will be specific to behavioral and social sciences degree programs. However, I think many of the lessons learned will likely generalize to other disciplines looking to incorporate data science approaches into graduate training in this kind of hybrid approach. One of the professors from our Stanford site, Lori Nelson, and one of her trainees, Michael Hittle, will be participating in the panel later. So that's going to give you an opportunity to hear from them directly. So I'll leave you with my email address here in case you have questions about my presentation, you'd like to get in touch and talk more about this. And I'd also like to just thank you for your attention today.
Good morning. I'm Patty Mabry. I'm a research investigator at HealthPartners Institute. I'm also an interdisciplinary scientist. I work mostly on applying cutting-edge methodologies such as artificial intelligence, network science, system science, data science to problems in health and healthcare, mostly in the behavioral and social sciences realm, including tobacco control, obesity, health disparities, science of science, and healthcare. So Today I'm here to talk to you about the 6 strategies for developing the precision nutrition workforce, which includes hybrids. Today's learning objectives for the first half, I'll be talking about the breadth of expertise that's needed to be brought to bear in research to realize precision nutrition in practice, including non-doctoral paths, career paths, and non-biomedical experts such as interdisciplinary scientists, which we call hybrids, methodological data and data infrastructure experts. In other words, non-biomedical research topical area experts. The second half will become familiar with the strategies that I'm recommending, 6 of them, and investments necessary to develop and retain the precision nutrition workforce, with a special focus on hybrid and non-biomedical experts. The big picture here is that precision nutrition is the idea of giving dietary advice to the individual in their context. And the context can be pretty complicated. So you can see here, this is a map of Foresight, which is an obesity research question map, trying to map all the forces that relate to obesity. And as you can see, each box represents a variable and each arrow represents a relationship. And so it's pretty overwhelming. And that's just for obesity, which might be only one of the many conditions that precision nutrition might try to address. So there's a bit of context there, but also there's time and place. So spatially, food environments change and they change over time and people move about and that kind of thing. And in addition, the variables interact with each other over time and change the conditions. So you have gene environment interactions, you have interactions within biological variables, and you also have behaviors such as exercise and intake of foods. I would argue that precision nutrition is one of the most complex, if not the most complex, of the precision medicine areas for the reason that food is not so simple as, say, for example, drugs can be chemically identified as an exact thing, whereas foods can, so many range of foods. Carbohydrates can mean so many different things, as can fats and proteins, and there's different ways of preparing foods. There's different cultural contexts, and the timing for consuming them, not to mention what they're consumed with, can change how they're absorbed by the body and so on. So it's very, very complex problem here. To represent that complexity, I have this diagram showing below the heavy black line is the biological levels under the skin, all the way from the genomic, and it can go down to even atomic, I think, levels, all the way up to organ tissue levels. And then outside the skin, we have individual, family, social group, and on up through global and geopolitical levels. And then, of course, it can vary not only across the lifespan, as seen here, but really at a variety of time scales that go across time for each type of analysis. So what kind of expertise do we need for a complex problem like precision nutrition? Well, we need a lot of topical area experts in the biomedical topic areas, such as you see the family eating dinner up in the upper right-hand corner there, and that's representing social area, going from that to the exercise specialists, exercise scientists, all your omics levels from genomics all the way up through phenomics, the digestive experts. You have disease area experts here. You have the children here in front of their community garden to represent the different ways that food can be grown, and that can affect its nutrition content. You have how it's prepared. You can have clinical nutrition experts, psychologists who help us with our relationship with food or understand our relationship with food. We have the spatial environment, like I mentioned, the food deserts and food areas of food consumption, food chemistry, and of course, data science, but it's well beyond data science. It's a lot of other fields that help us with the data and the analysis, which is the focus of the next several slides. So system science methods, which I spent a lot of time in this area, are intended to help us address this kind of complexity. So no precision nutrition effort would be complete without system science to help us address the temporal, spatial properties, network structures, hierarchical and nested structures of data, feedback loops, individual and group level variations in data, mediating and moderating variables, and nonlinear and nonparametric properties all at the same time. There's many different flavors of system science, of course, and these include microsimulation, agent-based modeling, system dynamics modeling, discrete event simulation, network analysis, including social network analysis and network science, which are actually two different fields within themselves, and each has a variety of different disciplines associated with it, which you can see here on this slide. And then this is just some of the system science methods. For example, within network science, if you look at the last bullet, the rest of this slide is for your reference, but the last bullet talks about the different kinds of disciplines within network science. They include statistical physics, social networks, social network analysis, computer science, information science, brain science, political science, and the list goes on. We also need artificial intelligence experts, which are folks that are, a lot of that work is focused on data mining, understanding from the data. And the disciplines there are computer science, information science and engineering, mathematics, psychology, linguistics, philosophy. These artificial intelligence includes things like machine learning, deep learning, but also natural language processing. And I think a lot of these would be required for, depending on which specific problem within precision nutrition you're going after. Even with all those methodological experts, and topical experts, we're going to still need more. We need the data scientists and the IT experts. These are the folks that help us get our data ready in shape for analysis. And that is going to be a lot of different types of people that have specialties in things like cloud computing and databases, how to set them up, the databases, and manage them, do the curation, and so on. So those are all the different things that are needed, but we still need more. So this is to summarize the previous slides. We need the dynamic, we need the, of course, the biomedical topic areas. We need dynamic modeling and simulation, network science, artificial intelligence, data science, and IT. We also need, the last two bullets, data and algorithmic bias, folks that are experts in fairness-aware data mining and auditing for bias in algorithms and data. We need data privacy and informed consent, folks that specialize in doing things like developing privacy-preserving algorithms so that when you get different data sets together, identities are not going to be discovered. And then, of course, the subject of a lot of our talk today is on hybrids, or people that go across different disciplines like me. And so who do we need in the disciplines? Why do we need hybrids, and who are they? So hybrids, really another name for them is interdisciplinary scientists, and they have expertise in more than one discipline and or work across disciplines. So see in this diagram of the different flavors of interdisciplinarity that you've got all the way from a single discipline, multiple disciplines, cross disciplines, then interdisciplines really is what we're talking about, where people overlap in different disciplines together in different ways. And then transdisciplinary is when you achieve a whole new field of those people. So what kind of interdisciplinary scientists will we need? Well, these are pictures of imaginary animals that could be combined, like a cat and a monkey, or a dog and a camel, a shark and a horse. And there could be sort of an infinite number of these imaginary animals. Similarly, with interdisciplinary scientists, there can be almost an infinite number of combinations of different disciplines. But we don't want to spend all our money just creating a whole bunch of different ones just because we can combine them. We need to be more strategic and think about which fields need to be combined. And that'll depend on what problem we have. So we can take these all these different disciplines that I mentioned before, the topical areas, and we'll need not only people that run between two disciplines, but people that run between 3 or 4 different disciplines. So we have to be thinking strategically, because there are so many combinations possible. We really have to think strategically about how to do this. So the way I thought about it was we first have to wrangle with 2 of the challenges that precision nutrition has, and one is the problem of the mother of all models, mom, the mom problem. And this comes up a lot in modeling. There's a temptation to model the entire complexity of the world that you're trying to understand, and then you get right back to where you would be if you studied the real world. It's too complex to understand. So we really need to break our problems into smaller pieces. So much like the foresight model, it's just too much complexity. It's not intelligible. The other problem we run into is disciplinary overcrowding. And disciplinary overcrowding is really if you just try to get all these experts and all the disciplines and all their hybrids together, we get something like the Tower of Babel. We have too many different languages and cultures for everybody to understand each other. So the solution to both of these problems is really to break our problems into smaller ones that are a little bit less complex and smaller, so that all the different disciplines can be sizable, a size that we can manage. So my first recommendation is to break it down into smaller chunks, and that is something we always do in modeling. We try to make our model as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so, for example, we could take a subsystem of the foresight model, and that would be one way to try to break down our problem. Another way would be try to go after a specific practical need. This over on the right shows you a recent article from 2020 that developed a simulation model to figure out dosing algorithms for patients, insulin dosing, in the context of their current medications and their diet and their exercise. And I think you could do the same thing with precision nutrition, to just turn it around and say, what would the dietary recommendation be given these medications, this exercise regimen, and try to figure out what the glucose metrics, if you had glucose metrics goals, those would sort of drive what the precision nutrition recommendations would be. So that's kind of the way I think about it, but there could be many other ways to break a problem down into smaller chunks. So regardless of what problem we pick, we're going to need different kinds of hybrid experts. So we'll need cross-topical experts, for example. So that might be something like genetics and metabolomics or something like that. We might need under the skin and outside the skin combinations, like behavioral and social science person with biologically trained person, all in one person. We might need data and methods expertise crossed with topical area expertise. And of course, we need big picture people to help us identify, to look across the whole precision nutrition problem, whatever it is, and be able to identify the expertise missing, what issues that might come up that are across specific disciplines, and that kind of thing. Next recommendation has to do with how are we still going to figure out exactly who these people are going to be, even though we know generally who they're going to be. We need to do some disciplinary analysis, in my opinion, to take that smaller problem and discover who are the current leading experts in it and what kind of hybrids are missing. And that way we can take those experts and help train them as the leaders and mentors. And we can also discover what exact hybrids are really not there. We can do this with a structural holes analysis. There's many ways to do it. I suggested author bibliographic coupling analysis and co-citation proximity analysis, but I'm sure there's many other ways. Also, to attract the non-topical experts, we need to give them some things that are going to make them want to work on precision nutrition. Otherwise, they'll just go straight to industry, to lucrative jobs. And I think there's a number of them that care about not just pay. You're going to have to pay pretty well to keep them from just siphoning off to industry. But there's also should be some interesting and worthwhile problems. And I think in precision nutrition, you have that. That'll probably attract some good people. But you also need good data, and you also need a sustainable career path. So that's kind of what some of these next recommendations are about. So the first one is investing in harnessing the data. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to need the data and the IT folks to make your data usable. Your data needs to be indexed, curated. You need metadata for searching. It needs to be hosted and maintained and cleaned and updated and all that stuff for the analytic people to be come and be interested in it. And for AI and big data research, it also might be necessary to convert your data into other kinds of formats. You might have to make it interoperable across different data sets. You might have to invest in some cloud resources, storage and computing to make sure it's accessible to everyone, and platforms for sharing research assets that are developed through the research, for discovery, for collaboration and reproducibility. So a good model for this is All of Us, but I don't think All of Us was designed specifically to meet all the precision nutrition needs, but it's a good jumping off point or template to follow. Recommendation number 4 has to do with investing in non-biomedical trainees, the data scientists, AI folks, the network scientists, simulation modelers. And this is a gap at NIH. NIH tends to focus on, rightly so, investigators, the established investigator and the pathway to that, whether that's physician scientist, veterinary, dentist, research scientist. This came directly from the training website at NIH, but we need to, if we're going to involve the AI and the data science and all these other folks in our work, we need to give them a career pathway. In addition, we need to talk about that pathway and the opportunities to train them and sustain them throughout their careers, not just at any single point. So this is the NIH website again, and it shows you the undergraduate all the way up through investigator, but we need those kind of opportunities for people that don't necessarily follow that pipeline. So for example, a lot of the data science folks might stop at a master's degree. So we need to give them some kind of opportunities along the way. Recommendation number 5 is investing in a multitude of types of training programs. And for this, I looked at what had already been done. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And I saw that Chris Backrack, former acting director of ODSS, now the president of Interdisciplinary Association for Population Health Sciences, put together a report on some facets that are for interdisciplinary training recommendations. And also my experience with the NIH Institute for System Science and Health that I developed, the immersive training for a week between the system scientists and the behavioral and social science health research investigators. These are some of the recommendations that I came up with. So impactful science, things that are going to make a difference in the real world and that can be translated. Of course, there's probably some basic research, obviously, that needs to be done as well. But there should be some immersive interdisciplinary experience as well, like the T32 program that Liz has developed. We need to provide specific mentoring and interdisciplinary skills outside of any specific discipline, and train, as I mentioned before, across the pipeline, and of course promote diversity by race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and so on. My last recommendation has to do with breaking down the funding silos for research and creating long-term homes and sustainability for the precision nutrition workforce. So these people that fall outside this biomedical research topical areas, we need to find ways to fund them. And I appreciate the Common Fund and how wonderful it is that it's supporting the precision nutrition effort. But I believe that if it's like other programs at NIH, once the RFAs go away, so will the funding, and then your people will be left high and dry. I don't think that'll be enough to attract them. They will want to know that there's a long-term plan here. That might be difficult because that requires NIH doing business differently, but I encourage NIH folks to think about that. My last slide here is from Francis Crick, a quote: "In nature, hybrid species are usually sterile, but in science, the reverse is often true. Hybrid subjects, meaning disciplines, are often astonishingly fertile, whereas if scientific disciplines remain too pure, it usually wilts." Thank you very much. I look forward to talking to you all in the Q&A session.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Liz and Patty, for a very stimulating presentation and a great way to kick off the morning and our panel to basically discuss some of the training opportunities and challenges and potential pitfalls when it comes to precision nutrition and computational analytics, as well as different data science approaches. So we're going to kick off the panel with introducing some of the folks that just joined our panel in addition to Patty and Liz. So I want to give an opportunity for each person to introduce themselves and maybe offer some comments, initial comments to kick us off about your thoughts about, again, some of the opportunities and potential pitfalls when it comes to training interdisciplinary researchers and scientists. We can start off with Jessica. Perhaps you can introduce yourself and give us some of your initial comments.
Thanks, Dr. Lee. Absolutely. It's nice to be here with everyone today. My name is Jessica Mazerik. I'm in the Office of Data Science Strategy at the NIH, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my work in the office. Officially, our office's Data Science Workforce Development Lead, but I've also played roles in other programs related to integrating artificial intelligence into biomedicine, translating large data sets to the cloud, enhancing software engineering, and promoting open science, and other data science infrastructure projects that reach broadly across NIH. I lead two main programs, training programs. One is a fellowship for mostly undergraduate level computer science, data science, and design students. And we run that in partnership with a nonprofit called Coding It Forward, whose goal is to give tech-savvy students experiences in the public sector. The second program is called the Data and Technology Advancement National Service Scholars Program, which we built to recruit data and computational experts from later career stages to work at NIH for 1 to 2 years in high-profile, data-heavy programs. One of the most challenging issues that I see with data science and biomedicine is recruiting women and other underrepresented groups into our workforce. And our office is really excited about some new collaborations that we have with other institutes around NIH to engage a diverse workforce in biomedical data science. And we know that diverse representation is certainly something that is important to many fields, including precision nutrition. And I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences and thoughts about this today.
Thank you, Dr. Mazerik. Sergio, would you like to introduce yourself and give us some of your opening comments?
Sure, it's such a fun event to be at. Hi, my name is Surjo Sen. I'm a program director with the National Human Genome Research Institute, part of the training team here. And I guess the biggest thing I would like to share is that here at NIH, we have done training in many ways for many decades now, but I think the general theme that we are all trying to get towards is where have the gaps been, and we need to identify these gaps, and we need to build more of these hybrid animals that I think we just saw on one of the slides. So partly with the Genome Institute, part of my portfolio, for example, involves things like how do we attract data scientists who are not working in biology at all to healthcare research, or specifically genomics research. And another piece of what I personally feel strongly about, and I know the NIH feels strongly about as well, is how do we diversify the workforce of trainees that are entering biomedical research, and not just in data science, but across the board. So I guess all of this comes partly from my own career, where like many other people, I started off at the bench, and then after my Ph.D., I became almost completely a bioinformatics person, and then for a couple of years I was shadowing clinical people, and then I was a project manager for NCI, and now finally I'm in the program director role here at the Genome Institute. So having had to reinvent myself each time I changed jobs, I realized that there was so much more to be learned from not getting too hung up on a particular flavor of training, and that sort of made me passionate about creating more programs to fill these gaps. So I think we have a lot to do here. I am fantastically excited to be part of the nutrition program and to see what we can do to train people to fill gaps in this area. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sen. So as Dr. Ginexi mentioned, we're fortunate to be joined by two members of the initial awardees for the T32 program. So Lorena, would you like to introduce yourself and offer some comments?
For inviting me here today. I am an epidemiologist and biostatistician on the faculty here at Stanford in the School of Medicine, and my traditional research had been in neuroepidemiology, studying genetic, environmental, and lifestyle risk factors for neurodegenerative diseases, and several years ago began to get very interested in the new set of tools, digital tools and so on, to collect data from subjects, and began incorporating that type of work into my research. This year, we are really pleased to be able to receive support from the NHLBI for the pre-doc training program in behavioral and social science research. And we will be training 5 doctoral students each year from one of several population health or social science disciplines, including epidemiology, sociology, psychology, or other related disciplines. We're kind of agnostic as to which discipline it is. We just seek students that are really strong and really interested in this area. The co-program director is Dr. Abby King, who's a health psychologist on our faculty, who in addition to her own research has done a number of trials, nutrition trials, in collaboration with Dr. Christopher Gardner here at Stanford. So our team, our sort of disciplinary team, which for each student is a dual mentoring team, including a mentor from their own substantive discipline, as well as a quantitative discipline, computer science, informatics, and so on. It's been exciting to draw on and meet faculty from across Stanford in the schools of medicine, humanity and sciences, engineering, and education. And so really, basically, we want to equip our students with the skills, the computational skills and the causal inference skills in order to make important discoveries using novel study designs and big data, no matter how complex or voluminous or high density or how rapidly obtained the data are, basically from any source to answer any research question. And so I really enjoyed Dr. Mabry's talk that really gave you the landscape of how broad that is and how ambitious that kind of goal is. So it's been really fun to meet the mentors from I think it's 11 other institutions around the country that are mentoring students, and already we have close ties. Last week, Dr. Lance Waller from Emory University met with us, myself and Michael Hittle, who you meet, to help us design and imagine new sort of statistical techniques to examine both temporal and geospatial data on COVID-19 cases in a population-based region. So that's one of Mike Hittle's projects, and already we're involving faculty from other training programs, including Dr. Waller. So I guess I would just summarize or conclude by saying that I really love Dr. Mabry's analogy about this transdisciplinary nature with these bricks between disciplines. It's really the mortar, it's the space between disciplines, the exciting space to be in and to be sort of steep on the learning curve at that. So I'm really pleased that one of our first students, Mike Hittle, is here today to be on the panel. He brings an incredible background and array of expertise already in computer science and digital health to our program, and he can tell you some of his own experiences. Thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. And just for everyone, I know that the sound cut up for a second. That was Dr. Lorraine Nelson, faculty at Stanford University. And on to you, Mike.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for including me today in this panel and in the BSSR training grant. I came to Stanford after a first career in web engineering and entrepreneurship. I'm a very non-traditional student, but the BSSR program has given me kind of a platform to grow from, and has given me a place to kind of start this pivot into biomedical science and research. So I'm a doctoral student in the epidemiology program at Stanford, and I think what I'm most excited about with the BSSR grant is the community. So it's not just what you learn, but who you learn that with. And so that community, that can grow with me and the other members of the cohort as our careers evolve and go in different paths. And as the world around us evolves too, I think is incredibly exciting. Lori is absolutely correct. I mean, we've already kind of started to reap some of the benefits of that community and engaging with faculty in different grant programs and recipients, and I'm really looking forward to kind of emboldening some of those relationships over time. As a trainee, some of the things that I consider when I'm making these decisions on which direction to go, or what opportunities to pursue, have a lot to do with friction and impact. And so there's all sorts of commercial opportunities out in the wild for someone with my skill set. But for me, working in biomedical science and epidemiology, it's about impact. It's about deeper mission and making a bigger impact on the world around me. And so part of my decision process was data accessibility. How realistic is it that I can make that impact? What data sets are there for me, kind of teed up and ready to analyze? And how easy is it to utilize that data? Do we have the infrastructure and all the plumbing and data pipes that make it easy for me to analyze those data and do something meaningful with it? So those are just some of the perspectives that I might have. But again, really appreciate being included here today. And the presentations that preceded this panel have really kind of enlightened me on all the great work that went into this training program way before I even knew it existed. So
excellent.
Thank you for that work.
Well, welcome everyone. So why don't we kick off with a few questions specifically for Dr. Ginexi and Dr. Mabry, and then we'll expand it to the rest of the panel. So Dr. Ginexi, you alluded to some of the challenges that were there when you were first trying to establish this T32 program. And we talk about systems and complex systems, affecting nutrition, but there are also complex systems when it comes to different disciplines and the way different organizations are structured. And we've really moved historically towards more and more siloing of different types of disciplines, making interdisciplinary research and efforts more difficult. What are your thoughts about how do we change some of these larger systems to help foster more interdisciplinary efforts and research and initiatives like the one that you've started?
That's a great question. Thank you very much. I think some of the challenges that I had to jump to make the T32 possible at the NIH are not unlike the types of challenges that my colleagues like Dr. Nelson are dealing with within their institutions, in that at the NIH, which is a very large biomedical research enterprise, there are, as you know, so many different institutes and centers, and there are so many people with specialized knowledge about the various disease entities that they get funded for. And the funding lines are directed to each disease, right? And one of the roles of being in the Office of the Director in the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research that I try to play is to make bridging across these institutes and disease inquiry areas possible. And so I think some of the examples you're hearing from the All of Us program and the Precision Nutrition program that are run through the OD, I think the spirit of those has been with that in mind, that while it is imperative that we do focus sometimes solely on particular disease problems like cancer or cardiovascular disease and so forth, kidney disease, there are commonalities across how we do our science, and especially when it comes to methodology, statistics, computational capabilities, learning how to incorporate the new tools from computer science. Math doesn't care what the disease question is, right? So just in the ways that Lori has to reach across her campus to try and partner with computer science folks to help mentor her students, we at the NIH and the federal agencies need to partner across the disciplines as well. So I'm on a number of different working groups where I see Jessica and Sergio, which is wonderful because I get to learn from them and hopefully they learn from me. And it's a slow process, but I think overall we're chipping away at it. So I think we have to break down those barriers as much as possible.
Thanks. And Dr. Mabry, you had a long career in NIH where you really were a pioneer in pushing the concept of system science and helping the NIH start a number of different initiatives. The word system science wasn't even in the vocabulary of many people before you really started making efforts at NIH. Maybe you could describe some of those efforts and some of the challenges that were involved when you were doing that work.
Thank you so much, Bruce, and it's an honor to be here with all these wonderful colleagues on this panel. The first thing I want to do is apologize for my black boxes all over my slides that I didn't know were there. So I assure you I have slides that don't have those black boxes, and I will make them available to you so you can read the full slide. And I also apologize to Liz Ginexi, who did a wonderful job on the T32 program that I incorrectly referred to as a T90. So sorry about that. I got my T's crossed, right? But to your question, Bruce, what was it like when I was there? Well, it was a pretty rough go, and it was, I think, like you said, pioneering work. When I first started, I think people didn't understand the concept of system science. They didn't understand why I was bringing up this whole new approach, and it sort of flew in the face of what they were used to. I think there was such an emphasis on the reductionist methodology when I was there that it didn't hit the right note at first. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of groundwork. It took having, honestly, some leadership in Dave Abrams, who gave me the latitude to do kind of whatever I needed to do to make this happen, because he could see the difference that this kind of approach could make. And it is not, if anyone's seen any of my other talks, which there are many, I do not believe that we do away with the reductionist approach, but it's just that the reductionist approach by itself is not enough. We need the system science methodologies and all the things that I talked about in my talk today. And it took that kind of leadership, but it's going to need, I think what I said on one of my last slides was breaking down the silos, and something that echoes kind of what Liz just said. We need to work all across NIH, and I guess having been there and seeing it go from roadmap to common fund was great to see that kind of program grow, but there still remains a problem that most of the things that come out of common fund are going to be RFAs, so they're going to be time limited. So I'm thinking that we have things like All of Us, we have the precision nutrition, and those are the focus areas that can bring about the change to focus on or to bring along these areas that haven't been brought along, these areas that are outside of biomedical research but are necessary for biomedical research, the methods and data folks. So I'm heartened to see that since I left, there is now the Office of Data Science that has come along and was started, the predecessor under Phil Bourne, and that's coming along, but it needs to be bigger, I think, and probably be tasked with developing this workforce like Jessica is, and I'd love to hear more about what you're doing there. But that definitely is something that needs a lot of work. With regard to what I did the week-long training sessions to bring people together until it was no longer possible. But I think Liz's approach with the T32 is a complementary one, and I do agree that the week-long, immersion was not enough. And yet those week-long Institute on System Science and Health, where I brought together people with the methodological expertise in the system science area, like network science or system dynamics modeling or agent-based modeling, and I brought them together with the people that had the problems in health and behavioral and social science aspects of health, and I brought them together for a week. I will say many of those many partnerships did spawn from there and have gone on to form new collaborations. But it's probably in and of itself far insufficient. And something like the T32 that gives the very deliberate mentoring and training in those programs is just wonderful to see, because that's exactly what's needed. But we're going to need more.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mabry. So, Dr. Mazerik, you touched upon the need for a more diverse workforce, and I think something that's not always understood is that a more diverse workforce actually helps the science and actually helps the work that's being done and helps us reach better solutions. So perhaps you could elaborate on that connection and maybe talk a little bit about some of the barriers and obstacles that exist right now to having a more diverse workforce when it comes to, we're talking about precision nutrition, but this also applies to computational analytics in general, and also this different types of interdisciplinary work.
Sure. Yes. So I think the first thing to note is that, as you mentioned, having a more diverse workforce really does make for better work products and better work environments. And I mentioned the summer program that we run with the students who are undergrads from computer science and design backgrounds. And, talking to those students, they mention how they learned so much about biomedicine, and they actually can see through their conversations with their mentors how they have been able to, bring new, more diverse thinking about a certain problem, for example, with clinical data elements and other things that they've worked on. So I think that that's something we see for sure in the programs that we run, and just the mentors learning from the students, and vice versa, of course. I'm sorry. My contractor is hammering in the basement right now.
Complex systems.
Yeah. So So one of the challenges with running programs and recruiting diverse students into the programs is that, prior to COVID, we basically were asking everyone to come do a fellowship at NIH or to, go to a university and do a fellowship there. But that's actually not feasible for a lot of students from minority communities. They have responsibilities at home, or they have responsibilities to their communities and their families that they can't get away from. And so we found that the remote fellowship really did, make a big difference for some of these students. And so that's something that we're thinking through now, how we can create more situations where we have a hybrid model where we do some remote and some in person, or we do full remote fellowships to be more inclusive in our program.
Thank you, Dr. Mazerik.
Ruth, I wanted to, can I tag onto that question a little bit?
Go for it.
Yeah. So Jessica, I guess this would be for you, but for everybody else too, just to be, I'm just thinking about how we can recruit more diverse groups into our data science. And I think one way is to be really deliberate about it. And, we need to pair the behavioral scientists with these computational, different flavors of computational methods. But there's other things that need to be done. And I think there's a program at Indiana University that's very flexible. So the way it's set up is that they have students from minority-serving institutions that can come and serve in the laboratories of the researchers there. So the way that it works, and I know this because I used to work at Indiana University and I worked with this program, they have a contract, I think it's from the Navy, to support this program. Then when any particular investigator writes a grant, they can write in that they're going to have a student from a minority-serving institution come and spend the summer with them. And then the grant from the Navy is what pays that stipend. So when the person puts in the grant, it's a very positive thing for the grant, because in a way there's cost sharing and it's increasing diversity. See, so if NIH could do something like that and support the students to go out and work on other people's grants, then they would be there when the topic area came along. Does that make sense? And there are a lot of folks in computational and in those minority serving institutions.
When I send the...
Hey, Bruce, can I add something as well?
Sure, Dr. Sen, go ahead.
Okay. So I think this is one of the areas where we need to take a step back and think, what have we not been doing? And at NIH, or at least at the Genome Institute, one of the thoughts in our head is, how do we build programs where the funding goes directly to the diverse institution instead of requiring some sort of partnership where a diverse institution would have to come in as an applicant alongside another possibly better funded institution. So we want to see what it would take for us to build funding announcements where these smaller institutions that possibly don't have a lot of experience with previous NIH applications feel empowered to contact the program officer, possibly connect with other institutions that share a similar situation as them, and then they would be the ones receiving the funding, and there is no dependence on them sending their students elsewhere to get the research experience or the classroom experience. So that's sort of a new effort we are trying to shape up. The second personal learning experience in this area has been that it needs trust building as much as just creating a funding announcement. So we are trying to reach out to faculty members, do sort of pilot studies to say, what would it take for you to get an application together? Like, can we help you with a little bit of seed funding? And this is mostly in the data science area in cloud computing. Like, would it help you to have a little bit of seed funding to do a pilot study in your institution so that you have the background to put a budget together? So I think particularly when it comes to diversity and training, we can't just approach this the same way we approach other training programs. That there's a human aspect to it that is on a parallel track with the purely administrative process of building a funding announcement. And, we are learning as we go along, but I do think that NIH as a whole across the board is really, really serious now about increasing diversity, not just in data science, but in biomedical research as a whole.
Yeah,
go ahead. Dr. Ginexi.
For the T32 programs now at the NIH, all recipients are now required to report on the diversity of their candidates that are being funded, the trainees. So, and we also require them to have in their grants initially some sort of plans to recruit and promote diversity within their programs. And that's all well and good. You can say, do this, please do this, record you're doing this. But when the rubber meets the road, it's very challenging to do. And maybe Laureen and Mike can talk a little bit about what that's like at an actual institution. Where do you find those students? How do you incentivize them? How do you attract them? And for our program in particular, the Behavioral and Social Sciences T32, the idea was to hopefully recruit students into these PhD programs that might not otherwise have chosen them, with the idea that those are very quantitatively minded people, and bring them in, and hopefully that helps attract those students. But maybe Laureen and Mike can speak to that a bit.
Yes. Just this year, and with the systemic racism, sort of new awareness, and our faculty in epidemiology and population health has established a program called AHEAD, which is Advanced Health, Equity, and Diversity. And so it's a summer research program where we invite students, and it's done in conjunction with the Office of Community Engagement here at Stanford. So it's a paid summer research internship program for college students who are from underrepresented and historically excluded groups in the health sciences. So we are getting a huge number of applications for this. We're simultaneously trying to, raise funding to support the maximum number of people that we can. I just wanted to bring that up as one example of a rapidly sort of developed and launched program that we have done to kind of reach out to more diverse students. Mike, I don't know if you would like to say anything.
I think that one one aspect of the trainee life that might often go maybe overlooked, and especially in a place like the Bay Area, is housing and housing security and housing stability. And so I think if you're looking to attract, a group of people that might be coming from a diverse socioeconomic background, really focusing on that housing component, because even though there are pathways to housing through different universities, each university is going to be a little bit different in their housing availability in the local area. So I just think that's maybe one opportunity to really kind of ensure that different groups from different backgrounds can approach it, that it's even accessible to be in proximity to a university that offers one of these programs.
You have the added perspective of having worked in industry and then moved into academia to do your program, and I know that Dr. Ginexi has mentioned about how do you get more people to pursue academic research or scientific research, et cetera. Maybe you could offer your perspective in terms of that, as well as contrasting the situation in the tech industry with academic research.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for asking me to answer that. Yeah, so I think one huge kind of source of attraction is data availability, and so data becomes a bit of an asset that you can use to, I think, attract talent. And so I know plenty of people that go and work for companies like Facebook or Google because they have interesting research questions that they want to apply to a very, very rich, unique data set that no one else really has access to. And so I think having a focus on that as a resource, where people can launch research questions against those data sets is incredibly valuable to kind of pull people in the direction of academia. And then I think reducing friction, and one of the differences largely between I think academia and the private sector is the alignment and kind of the barriers and friction. And in the private industry, the company might be a little bit more focused, and so you don't have as many abilities to kind of pursue your own hypotheses. But when you're focused on a hypothesis that is aiding the mission of the company, there are virtually no barriers. Academia is a little bit different in the sense that there are probably more opportunities to pursue heterogeneous hypotheses, but all of the barriers are maybe a little bit higher. And so as it relates to data and data access, I think reducing the friction and then focusing on really rich and accessible data sets, because in health research specifically, the data are very very sensitive, and the compliance barriers are very large. So reducing those, at least for the student experience, I think could help reduce some of that friction and attract more students.
Great, thanks. So with our remaining 8 minutes in our session, I'm going to turn to some of the questions that are being asked by our audience members. So the first question is about training clinicians like MDs, RDs. What are your thoughts about training clinicians? Dr. Mabry, I think this question was directed specifically to you, but certainly anyone who has any thoughts can answer this question. And the second of this two-part question was, how can clinical researchers be supported? So Dr. Mabry, do you have some initial thoughts? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have any specific, experience in training clinicians in data science or anything like that. But I would think that, what we need is, I guess if we had the funding for it, then the next question is, well, okay, then how do you involve them? And I know that we have plenty of clinician researchers here at my organization, and maybe these are the, so I'm a, fully integrated healthcare system that's got research and healthcare and a health plan, and think something like along the lines of Kaiser, and we have a whole bunch of these kind of organizations, and this would be maybe a really good place to do something like that, because we do have the clinician researchers here. What we really don't have, though, is probably enough of the data scientists. Anyway, so can we, maybe someone else has other thoughts. I don't want to take up all the remaining time.
Dr. Ginexi?
Yeah, I think this really is the crux of how we crack the team science nut. And I think there are some models that are being tried at different universities that we can think about. I'll mention just a couple that I'm personally aware of just from talking with colleagues. I know some folks at Arizona State University, and if you go to their website or if you drop into Google, you can take a look at something brand new that they've done over the past year. They've taken several of their departments and essentially not really eliminated them, but put them under an umbrella called the College for Health Solutions. And so the idea here is, rather than having a psychology department, a bioinformatics department, a clinical training department, a biology department, or whatever, but have a college that's focused on health questions and require all these faculty to be aware of each other, learn to work together, and then when particular health challenges come up, then they're well poised to draw upon their collective expertise, including the clinicians. And this is the model they're using for their training programs. So they have training for undergraduates, graduate students, postdocs, and the like. And so it's infusing the whole university infrastructure. So that's one model. Another model I've heard about is through the UC system, and you may know Laureen Atil-Bute, who I've heard speak quite a bit about how the UC data enterprise, all of the electronic health records that are collected through the UC health system, they have created a sort of entire network of all of those places around the state to create a sort of unified dashboard of all those data. And in doing so, are able to create a research platform of all that clinical data to which all the faculty and students can apply to work in that environment, train in that environment, work with the faculty in that environment. So kind of providing the infrastructure for a cross-site, multidisciplinary research enterprise. And so those are kind of two approaches that I've heard that I think are particularly innovative, that I think would necessarily require input from clinicians, from informatics folks, sort of just, again, the team science thing. And that could be a place where clinicians who want to plug in and get that training, those kinds of models would help.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ginexi. Did anyone have anything else to add?
I would just add.
Bruce, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, here at Stanford, and from about the year 2000, we've had a really active training program, Masters in Epidemiology and Clinical Research. And so about 20 of our 40 master's students each year are clinicians, usually in fellowship training. And the training is very quantitative, and they all learn to code in R and analyze their own data. The other resource we have here at Stanford is the Stanford Center for Population Health Sciences, that has a data center with 81 data sets, very, very rich data sets, commercial claims data, Medicare data, and so on, that is made available to all the trainees. So that resource, having that available, has been critical. So I'll pause there.
Dr. Shani, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, Bruce, this is an interesting question, and as an MD, maybe you have something to add to this as well. We are in the middle of trying to build a data science training program for medical students. And the question has been coming up of at which stage in an already extremely packed med school experience do we hit them with the data science, and what are our chances of retaining them down the line, because these people are never going to be short of options in terms of careers. So we are trying this hybrid approach of, after their second year, doing a summer school in data science, followed later on at the time when they enter residency, giving them 1 year of funding to come work in a data science lab as a early career physician, with the hope that down the line they enjoy the early summer experience and the later 1 year experience enough that in their practice they decide to incorporate some level of data science either to guide treatment or as clinician scientists. So this is just a complex question of how do we build data science into an already taxing med school curriculum and make it enjoyable enough that they're not like, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to forget this and just go start seeing patients. So it's a hard question, I'll say that. And for people later in their careers who already have busy practices or research programs, I guess it becomes even harder.
Yeah, Dr. Shen, I think you alluded to a very important point, that the fact that their clinician schedules are already very busy and have a lot of things. So what's going to give? How are you going to free up time to then allow introductions and immersion in data science? So we have about a minute left in our panel. I would love to keep talking about this for the next several hours, but unfortunately we're limited by time. I wanted to mention one more question that came from the audience. I know that we won't be able to answer in full, but it was, how do you develop a common goal among people with different expertise? How do you bring people together? What are the quote-unquote gluing agents that will keep people together? Because we know that different people may have different plans or agendas or also incentives. So tough to answer within just a minute, but wanted to see if anyone had some initial answers to this, and then we potentially could address it later on, beyond this meeting. Any initial thoughts?
I guess for me, there's three things. Probably people that keep you glued together, collaborators that you really like to work with, compelling research problems, and then data. And so just a couple of pieces of sets of data that hasn't been mentioned yet. One is the synthetic data from Massachusetts. It's, I think, the entire population of Massachusetts that's been, it's synthetic agents that have all the features of the real population, so there's no chance of identifying a real person, but there's good data there. It's called Cynthia, I believe. And then there's also the Health Data Lake. I think it's Amazon that's developing that for EHR data. And of course, that is sensitive data, but just another place to go for the data piece. But yes, I think those are, to me, the three glues.
Any other quick thoughts in terms of glues or bringing people together?
I think this whole data science issue has provided an impetus for us to start requiring at least a base level of shared language and shared linguistics, and an opportunity for data science literacy requirements starting from high school through college and even up through med school, if you will. If everyone has at least a base level understanding of how kind of the big data enterprise needs to work or how it works, at the very least, if you don't become a data scientist, you could understand and converse with those who do. And I think there are programs that are trying to figure out what are those core competencies, and that'll likely evolve over time. And to Sergio's point, people are busy. What's the level that's right for each academic stage? And but I think those core competencies could help provide some common knowledge that may help tie everything together a little bit.
Great. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, we've been thinking a lot about teaming in some of the programs that we're developing now. And I think that it's so important that we get it right and set a good example for the community, because when we have these successes, people will be encouraged to work together and to bring in people from outside of their space and people who think differently and, work on different problems. And we can really show that coming together will give a better solution. So hopefully when we start to build some programs that require some strong teaming, we will have success, and those will set good examples for future.
All right, excellent. Well, again, we certainly would love to talk about this more, and we're very grateful to have each of your time available to talk about this very important subject. So we're going to need to take a break for about 15 minutes, I guess, until 10:45, which is the start of section 5, when we start talking about what do we mean when we talk about these different types of analytics like AI, machine learning, modeling, etc. So please join us for the next session. Again, that will start at 10:45 a.m. And I wanted to thank all of our panelists and presenters from our first session this morning. You're doing really valuable work when it comes to advancing not just precision nutrition, but really all of health and data analytics. So appreciate your efforts, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.